Sarah Martinez looked at the mortgage envelope with trembling hands. At 45, a registered nurse in Dallas with 20 years of experience, she never imagined she would be there, at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., calculating whether she could afford the house where she raised her 2 children. The red envelope from Wells Fargo brought the final notice: 30 days to settle $4,800 in arrears or face foreclosure. Her husband, David, a 47-year-old software engineer laid off 8 months ago when the tech startup where he worked went bankrupt, slept restlessly in the next room. What began as a temporary period of unemployment had transformed into a devastating spiral. The $1,200 weekly unemployment insurance had ended, and 340 applications sent resulted in only 12 interviews and no concrete offers. Between them, a heavy silence that grew with each unpaid bill. Sarah earned $65,000 annually at Methodist Hospital. The fights began subtly. Acid comments about David not trying hard enough, or him questioning her unnecessary spending on the children. Emma, 16, noticed the tension and stopped asking for money for school activities. Jake, 13, began asking if they were going to move, like his best friend's parents did after their divorce. The bank account showed $340. The credit card had reached its $15,000 limit. Sarah mentally calculated, if they sold David's car, they would get $8,000, enough for 2 months of relief. But how would he look for work without transportation? Reality hit hard that cold October dawn. They were another American, middle-class family on the brink of financial collapse in middle age. Exactly when they should be accumulating for retirement. The American dream had become the American nightmare, and they didn't know how to wake up. The Martinez story isn't unique, and Michael Thompson knows this better than anyone. The certified financial consultant from Phoenix, with 15 years of experience, has seen his practice explode in recent years. I see 3 families per week in the same situation, he says, adjusting his glasses while reviewing piles of documents scattered across his mahogany office desk. The profile has changed dramatically since 2020. Before, it was mainly small business owners or people with addictions. Today, it's middle-class families with stable jobs who simply can't keep up with the cost of living anymore. According to data from the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts, more than 750,000 Americans declared personal bankruptcy in 2023, representing an 18% increase from the previous year. What most impresses Thompson is the demographics. 68% were between 35 and 54 years old, precisely the age group that should be at the peak of financial stability. Their family parents, established professionals, people who did everything right according to traditional standards. He explains, showing a colorful chart on the monitor. The main causes reveal an America in silent crisis. Medical expenses represent a staggering 42% of cases, a phenomenon almost non-existent in other developed countries. Jennifer Walsh, 48, a school administrator from Seattle, discovered this the hard way when breast cancer cost $180,000, even with insurance through the school district. Our $15,000 emergency reserve evaporated in 3 months. She remembers sitting in the 2-bedroom apartment she rents after losing the 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. The second cause, job loss, represents 28% of cases and reflects the new reality of the American job market. Thompson cites the example of Richard Kowalski, a 52-year-old mechanical engineer from Detroit, laid off when GM closed a factory. Richard earned $78,000 annually. He was unemployed for 14 months, burned through $45,000 in savings and 401k. Accepted a job for $52,000 in another city. But the costs of moving, selling the house at a loss, and adaptation destroyed his finances. Divorce closes the podium of financial tragedies with 18% of cases. A couple that maintained a lifestyle with $85,000 combined suddenly needs to maintain 2 houses, 2 electric bills, 2 car insurances, Thompson explains. The most shocking statistic comes from the Federal Reserve. The average American family has only $1,000 in savings, making any emergency a potential catastrophe. Thompson pauses, removes his glasses, and cleans them slowly. The most devastating thing isn't just the numbers on spreadsheets, but how these crises destroy confidence, communication, and intimacy between couples who once dreamed together of building a life. His files show that 73% of clients report severe marital problems during financial crisis. Half divorce within 2 years of declaring bankruptcy. Money doesn't buy happiness, he whispers, filing away another divorce case combined with personal bankruptcy, but its lack has the power to destroy relationships built over decades. The office silence is broken only by the sound of the printer, producing another financial recovery plan, an attempt to rebuild lives shattered by modern economic reality. Robert and Linda Chun were exactly 63 days away from losing their home in Portland when they decided to face reality head-on, without masks or excuses. It was a rainy March morning when they sat at the kitchen table with a pile of bills, bank statements, and a calculator that would change their lives. He, a 52-year-old certified public accountant, had lost 3 large clients when local businesses closed during the recession. She, a high school math teacher, saw her salary frozen for 2 consecutive years by the crisis-hit school district. "We stopped pretending everything was okay that Saturday," says Linda, serving coffee in the kitchen they almost lost, now decorated with a colorful spreadsheet on the refrigerator showing the recovery journey. Robert had hidden 2 overdue credit card bills. "I hid that I had borrowed $3,000 from my 401k. We were lying to each other and to ourselves." The first strategy was brutal in its simplicity. List absolutely all debts and income in a shared Google Sheet spreadsheet, accessible to both at any time. The result was a punch to the stomach. "We had our first honest fight in years that night," remembers Robert, showing before and after photos of their financial situation. "But for the first time we fought together against the problem, not against each other." The couple religiously applied the debt avalanche method, prioritizing the highest interest rates first. The Discover card, with 24.99% interest, became enemy number 1. They cut the cable TV plan, $85 a month, canceled unnecessary streaming subscriptions, $47 a month, sold Robert's Honda Accord for $12,000, and began sharing Linda's price. Linda transformed her math expertise into extra income, offering private tutoring online through Wisent and Tutor.com, earning between $400 to $600 monthly. Robert offered freelance accounting services to small local businesses on weekends, using Upwork and word-of-mouth recommendations, generating another $500 to $800 monthly. In 6 months of military discipline, they reduced the monthly deficit from $1,600 to $400. The turning point came when they discovered the HARP, Home Affordable Refinance Program, through a nonprofit housing counselor. They managed to renegotiate the 30-year mortgage from 6.8% to 30 years at 4.2%, reducing the monthly payment by $380. "Communication saved our marriage," reveals Robert, adjusting the spreadsheet on the laptop screen. "Before, I hid bills from her out of silly masculine shame. Now, we review everything together every Monday at 7 p.m. after dinner. It's our Money Monday, sacred like going to church." The couple created a 3-account system, one for fixed expenses 70% of income, another for emergencies 20%, and a third for mental sanity 10%. Small pleasures that avoid the feeling of total deprivation. "We discovered that $40 monthly for dinner out keeps us human and focused," Linda smiles. Today, 18 months after Truth Saturday, the Chens have balanced finances, all credit card debts paid off. Amanda Rodriguez discovered at 44 that she could unexplain to her teenage daughter the difference between simple and compound interest, much less how a 401k worked or why people invested in the stock market. A single mother in Miami, she worked as a sales manager at a Honda dealership, earning $55,000 annually for 5 years. But her savings stubbornly remained at zero, as if there were a black hole sucking up every dollar left over. I thought investing was for rich Wall Street people. People with MIAs and expensive suits, she confesses, leafing through highlighted copies of The Intelligent Investor and Your Money or Your Life on her living room coffee table. My family came from El Salvador with nothing. My parents worked their whole lives in manual jobs, literally kept money under the mattress. No one ever taught me that idle money loses value with inflation. The brutal awakening came on a Sunday morning when Isabella, her 16-year-old daughter, casually asked during breakfast about college funds and university plans. Amanda realized with horror that she had no answer, much less a plan. The young woman wanted to study biomedical engineering at the University of Miami. According to a survey by the National Financial Educators Council, 57% of Americans are functionally financially illiterate, costing the average person $1,883 per year in bad decisions. For Amanda, this cost was much higher. Without understanding inflation, she kept $8,000 in a checking account, earning 0.01% per year, systematically losing purchasing power. Amanda began her financial education methodically, dedicating 30 minutes every night after Isabella went to sleep. First, basic concepts through free videos on Khan Academy and YouTube channels like 2 Cents and Ben Felix. She learned that average American inflation is 3.2% per year, meaning $100 today is worth $97 next year if it doesn't earn anything. The first practical step was opening a high-yield savings account at Marcus Goldman Sachs, automatically transferring $300 monthly to 15% of net salary. The account earned 4.2% per year, infinitely better than the checking account pennies. It seemed like magic to see interest being credited monthly. She smiles, showing the statements on the app. 6 months later, Amanda understood concepts like P/E ratio, diversification, dollar cost averaging, and tax planning. She discovered she didn't need to choose individual stocks. There were index funds that replicated the entire market for very low fees. Her first investment was modest but symbolic. $100 monthly in the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, VU, with a fee of only 0.03% per year. I didn't need to be Warren Buffett to start, she laughs, showing the first year's statement. $1,200 invested had become $1,344, 12% growth. For the first time in my life, my money was working for me while I slept. The transformation transcended numbers. Amanda created colorful Google Sheets, tracking expenses by category. Discovering she spent $280 monthly on eating out, money that could yield $420,000 in 30 years if invested at 7% annually. She cut it to $100 monthly, investing the difference. Isabella became an accomplice in family financial education. Together, they watched The Big Short, discussing economic concepts, simulated investments in a fictional portfolio, studied compound interest through online calculators. Amanda taught about responsible credit card use, credit score, and the sacred 50-30-20 rule. 50% for needs, 30% for wants, 20% for savings and investments. Today, 2 years after the financial awakening, Amanda has $12,500 invested in diversified ETFs, $8,000 in emergency fund, and a $529 college savings plan with $3,200 for Isabella. Most importantly, She created a solid foundation of financial knowledge that transformed her relationship with money from fear and ignorance to confidence and control. Financial education didn't just change my bank account numbers, she reflects, organizing invoices in a labeled folder. It changed my confidence as a mother, as a woman, as a person. Now when Isabella asks about the future, I have answers and plans. Thomas Wilson was at rock bottom when reality hit him like a hammer. At 49, an A-certified mechanic in Detroit, he saw the shop where he had worked for 15 years, Thompson S. Auto Repair, close permanently during the pandemic when business dropped 70% and the owner, Mr. Thompson, at 68, decided he couldn't recover. It was like losing a father, says Thomas, instinctively cleaning his hands with an old rag, a habit he maintains even working mostly from home now. The financial situation was desperate. With 2 daughters, Sarah, 16, dreaming of veterinary medicine, and Emma, 14, passionate about theater, and a $1,400 monthly mortgage on a modest house in Warren suburbs, Thomas needed quick solutions. The $362 weekly unemployment insurance covered less than half of family expenses. His wife, Lisa, a secretary at an elementary school, earned $28,000 annually, sufficient in normal times as supplementary income, insufficient as primary income. I couldn't wait for the job market to improve, he says, showing handwritten spreadsheets where he controlled every penny. Detroit was still recovering from decades of industrial decline. Mechanic positions paid 30% less than before when they existed. The first extra income arose organically from what Thomas always knew how to do best: fix cars. Using apps like TaskRabbit, Thumbtack, and even Facebook Marketplace posts, he began offering home automotive services on weekends, oil changes, brakes, small repairs. The differential was convenience. He went to the client. I started charging $20 for oil change plus $15 for travel. It seemed little, but I could do 6 to 8 cars per Saturday, explains Thomas, showing a worn leather agenda where he noted each service in careful handwriting. In 2 months, he had earned an extra $2,800, buying portable tools and building a loyal clientele through word of mouth. Meanwhile, Lisa discovered a hidden talent that transformed the kitchen into a profit center. She had always made extraordinary cakes for family birthdays, but never considered it a business. She started selling to school colleagues, then expanded through Facebook Marketplace and local Instagram. The first custom cake was a frozen one for the neighbor's daughter for $45. It cost $12 in ingredients, remembers Lisa, leafing through a notebook full of photos of her creations. The turning point for Thomas came through a financial podcast he discovered during trips to clients. The Investors Podcast introduced him to the concept of dividend-paying stocks, shares that pay quarterly dividends to shareholders. With only $500 initially, half the profits from a particularly good weekend, he bought shares of Coca-Cola, $KO, AT&T, $T, and Realty Income Corporation, $O. Each quarter $12 here, $18 there arrived in dividends. It seemed little, but it was revolutionary. Money appearing in the account without me working specifically for those dollars. Explains Thomas, showing the E** trade app on his battered phone. For the first time, I understood what money working for you meant. Thomas' strategy was simple but disciplined. Automatically reinvest all dividends, DRIP, dividend reinvestment plan, and add $150 monthly from extra services to the portfolio. In 14 months, the initial $500 had become $3,200. Combining stock appreciation 18% and dividend reinvestment. Lisa, inspired by her husband's success, strategically expanded the cake business. She created partnerships with 2 local children's party venues, offering 10% commission for referrals. She developed a specialty in wedding cakes. The couple also discovered REITs, real estate investment trusts, as a way to invest in commercial real estate without needing hundreds of thousands of dollars. They bought shares of the Vanguard Real Estate ETF, VNQ, gaining exposure to shopping centers, offices, and apartments throughout the country. It's like owning pieces of Manhattan buildings without leaving Detroit, Thomas jokes. Income diversification became a life philosophy. Thomas got a job in a new shop that maintains home services on Saturdays. Lisa expanded to decorated cookies and sweets for corporate parties. Together, they created income streams totaling $2,400 to $3,200 extra monthly, depending on the season. Today, 3 years after Thompson's auto repair closed, the Wilson family has $18,500 invested in dividend-paying stocks, REITs, and index funds. Most importantly, they developed an entrepreneurial mindset that protects them from future economic shocks. I learned that depending on just one salary is like living in a house with one door. Philosophizes Thomas, adjusting a wrench on the improvised workbench in the garage. When that door closes, you're trapped. But when you have multiple income sources, there's always an open window. Diversifying income is as important as diversifying investments. The Johnson family from Nashville represents what's possible when crisis becomes an opportunity for growth. Mark, 46, a real estate broker, and Kelly, 43, a nurse, almost lost everything in 2019 when the local real estate market slowed down and she had emergency surgery. We were $3,000 away from bankruptcy, remembers Kelly, pointing to a printed spreadsheet on the refrigerator, their financial victory map. The recovery began with profound behavioral changes. They instituted monthly family meetings where even the children, 12 and 15 years old, participate in the household budget. The kids understood we weren't poor, but we were rebuilding, explains Mark. They created a 3-account system: emergency, 6 months of expenses, opportunities, investments, and fund 20% of free income. The emergency fund was absolute priority, built with $300 monthly over 18 months. For investments, they followed the 60-30-10 strategy: 60% in diversified index funds, 30% in government bonds, 10% in risky investments like individual stocks. Kelly went back to school, specializing in home nursing, increasing income by 40%. Mark expanded into commercial real estate, creating passive income streams through recurring commissions. The secret to sustainable success? Automation. All transfers to savings and investments happen automatically on payday. If we don't see the money, we don't spend it, Kelly smiles. Today, 3 years after the crisis, the Johnsons have $45,000 invested, a paid-off house, and are planning early retirement at 55. Mark summarizes, "Bankruptcy almost destroyed our family, but it taught us that financial security isn't about earning more. It's about spending consciously and investing consistently